Yes, you can transfer. If you can just tell the media again, we'll be starting shortly, and thank you for the patience. I think that'd be great.
Okay, so I'll do that, and after that, everything you will see from now on will be heard by the media.
Okay.
So please stand by. Thank you.
This conference is being recorded.
Hello, bonjour. My name is Joanne Kenya Baker, and I'm the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Specialist for the City of Markham. It is my pleasure to be with you here today. Bonjour tout le monde. Je m'appelle Joanne Kenya Baker et je suis spécialité de diversité, d'équité et de l'inclusion pour la ville de Markham. C'est un plaisir pour d'être avec vous aujourd'hui. But before I introduce everyone, I would like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional territories of Indigenous peoples and their commitment to the stewardship of the land. We acknowledge the communities in Circle, the north, the west, the south, and the eastern directions, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Seneca, Chippewa, and the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit peoples. We share the responsibility with the caretakers of this land to ensure the dish is never empty and to restore relationships that are based on peace, friendship, love, and understanding. We are committed to reconciliation and partnership with enhanced understanding. I'd like to welcome you all to this beautiful property, the Ani Center. Ani in Ojibwe means welcome. The name was chosen to welcome Markham's many diverse communities and in honor of our First Nations people. So today, we welcome you all. Today, the Honorable Marco Mendicino, Minister of Public Safety, will make a funding announcement to strengthen local efforts to counter the social conditions that lead to criminal behavior. Aujourd'hui, l'Honorable Marco Mendicino, Ministre de la Sécurité publique, fera une annonce des financements pour renforcer les efforts locaux visant à contrer les conditions sociales qui menent comportement criminel. to give you an idea of how today's event will unfold, we will hear brief remarks from the Minister and Mayor Scarpiti, followed by a question and answer section. Pour vous donner un aperçu du déroulement des événements aujourd'hui, nous entendrons d'abord de brèves allocutions du ministre Mendicino et la maire Frank Scarpiti, monsieur, suivent d'une période de questions et de réponses. So right now, I would like to welcome you, Mayor Mendicino. Thank you. Minister Mendicino.
That's fine. Merci, Joanne. Bon après-midi, tout le monde. Good afternoon. And I would like to thank you, Joanne, for the Indigenous Land Acknowledgement, for welcoming us here to the Ani Community Center. As you pointed out, the Ojibwe translation for that is to welcome, and certainly we feel the hospitality by you, Mayor Scarpiti. It's always good to be with you, my friend, and also to be joined by a number of friends and colleagues. We have with us MP Tony Van Bynen, we have MP Majid Jawari, and right behind me here, of course, MP Paul Jang. I also want to acknowledge that we're in my friend and colleague's Minister Ng's riding, and I know that she sends her very best as she is traveling abroad, but her support is with us today, and we're thankful for it. It's great to be in Markham. Markham is a wonderful and a diverse and growing community. It's a great place to live, to work, and to raise a family. Neighbors look after one another, and many are so proud to call this community home. But like too many other communities across Canada, the peace and harmony on the streets of Markham have far too often been shattered by the sound of gunshots. Less than a month ago, the sound of gunshots reverberated at the intersection of Highway 407 and the 9th Line, and another life was lost. A 17-year-old with the majority of his days in front of him. I wish I could say this was a rare or isolated incident. Sadly, it's not. Across Canada, we've seen the same tragedy play out time and time again. The communities may be different, but the tragedies and the script are the same. Les Canadiennes s'inquiètent avec raison des crimes violents que nous continuons de voir dans nos quartiers, comme nous l'avons vu ici. Une grande partie de cette violence est liée à l'activité des gangs. Cette activité se font de plus en plus dans des endroits publics, souvent en plein jour. C'est inacceptable et ça nous met tous en danger. Now, you can measure this through the numbers and statistics, and they are stark. Between 2009 and 2019, the criminal use of firearms increased by 81% across Canada. Or you can look at it through the eyes of parents and kids across this country. Last week, I had the opportunity to take my first domestic tour as Minister of Public Safety, and I was in British Columbia and in Manitoba. And in the community of Surrey, I had an opportunity to meet with community leaders there who recounted to me a recent incident where a gun was found in an elementary school. A gun found in an elementary school. As a parent, it's horrifying. As a Canadian, it's alarming. And as your Minister of Public Safety, I'm taking action. People in Markham and Surrey deserve to feel safe in their communities. Every Canadian deserves to feel safe in their communities. And that means taking more action to reduce gun violence. Our government has a focused action plan that will fight gun crime and keep Canadians safe. La protection des Canadiens contre la violence liée aux armes à feu et aux gangs est notre priorité absolue. Avec des lois solides, nous pouvons prendre des mesures pratiques, ciblées et mesurées pour protéger les Canadiens et même arrêter le trafic, le vol et le détournement des armes à feu. Nous avons aussi versé d'importants fonds pour les services policiers et les efforts communautaires pour lutter contre les crimes violents. Je sais que les policiers travaillent fort pour assurer notre sécurité, qu'il s'agisse de patrouilles ou d'enquêtes. We have a plan that rests on a number of pillars. We're reinforcing our borders to stop illegal guns from getting into the country. We've banned deadly firearms to prevent them from getting into the hands of criminals. And we're building safer communities. Our plan is well underway. At our borders, our government has invested significant federal funding to give RCMP and CBSA the tools and the resources that they need to fight illegal gun smuggling and to stop firearms from coming into Canada. And again, I had the opportunity to meet with various branches of law enforcement, both in British Columbia and Manitoba last week, where I saw firsthand the technology that is being used, the canine units, the dogs that are inspecting vehicles and individuals. And I'm reassured that we are making tremendous progress at our official ports of entry. In fact, last year in 2021, we had a record year when it comes to arresting and seizing firearms, and that is a reflection of this government's commitment to give law enforcement all of the tools they need to stop illegal trafficking at our borders. We've also introduced stronger and responsible gun controls, including a ban on assault-style weapons like AR-15s, which guns have no other purpose than to kill. Now, this order in council, which was issued in May of 2020, has already seen more than 1,500 different firearms from being prohibited from being sold in Canada. And in the near future, we will be launching a mandatory buyback program to now get these guns out of our communities and off our streets. Today, we're here to talk about how we're going to build safer communities. Now, we put a lot of emphasis on introducing strong gun controls. We put a lot of emphasis on investing in law enforcement, but we also have to tackle the root causes of gun violence in the first place. The conditions that spur someone, especially young people, from making the wrong choices, getting involved in organized crime, picking up a gun, and using it. There was a quote that struck me from a parent of a young boy who was killed as a result of a gun crime. And he said, "No kid wakes up at 13 years old and says, 'I'm going to be a gang member today.' They might do terrible things, but at the end of the day, they found themselves there, and often they don't even know how the hell they got there." We need to help those kids so that they make the right choices in the first place. And even more importantly, we need to keep them from getting into those positions in the first place. And that's what brings us here today. To help stop gun violence before it even starts, I'm very proud to announce new federal funding support through the Building Safer Communities Fund, supported by a $250 million investment in federal funding. The program will provide funds directly to municipalities and Indigenous communities, who will then distribute them to local organizations focusing on young people who are involved in or at risk of joining gangs. I'm also pleased to announce that this $250 million investment will include a $7.3 million allocation right here for the City of Markham. Pour mettre fin à la violence des armes à feu avant même qu'elle ne commence, je suis très fier d'annoncer un nouveau appui fédéral avec les fonds pour des communautés plus sûres, soutenues par un financement fédéral de 250 millions de dollars. Au cours des 5 prochaines années, le programme fournira des fonds aux municipalités et aux communautés autochtones qui les distribueront ensuite à des organisations locales axées sur les jeunes qui font partie de gangs ou qui risquent d'en faire partie. Each community's amount will be based on population and crime rates so that funding will get to the communities who need it the most. And this will ensure that smaller towns and Indigenous communities with a high crime rate will also receive the support that they need. This builds on the success of our initiative to take action against gun and gang violence, which has devoted over $350 million in the last 5 years to tackle the increase in gun-related violence and gang activity in Canada. Le financement pour les communautés au Québec sera déterminé en collaboration avec le gouvernement provincial dans le respect des compétences du gouvernement du Québec. Je souhaite également faire le point sur le décret d'amnistie que l'accompagne l'interdiction des armes à feu de type OSSO de 1er mai 2020 et qui bénéficiera d'une prolongation administrative jusqu'au 30 octobre 2023. Cela donnera le temps aux fonctionnaires de finaliser et de mettre en œuvre un solide programme de rachat obligatoire et permettra aux propriétaires d'armes à feu et aux entreprises de prendre toutes les mesures raisonnables pour se conformer à la loi. As I conclude today, I want to leave you with a few parting thoughts. No single initiative or measure holds the solution to gun violence. I've been engaging in the short few months that I've had this job with advocates right across the country, including a very important conversation that I had today. And it struck me that there are many different causes that lead to gun violence across this country. And there's no one magic wand that we can wave, no one solution that we can put into place to solve the problem. It requires a multifaceted approach. It requires a strategy with a number of pillars that, yes, puts into place the necessary strong and responsible gun controls, including a ban on deadly firearms. Yes, it requires continuing to invest in law enforcement so that we can stop the illegal trafficking of guns, deadly guns that get into our communities at our borders. It involves investing in law enforcement so that we can have public safety and public order in our communities. And yes, it equally requires us to tackle the root causes of gun crime in the first place, addressing squarely the systemic challenges that lead to young people and other people who are at risk in priority communities so that they make the right choices and not the wrong choices. And that means building safer and more resilient communities, and that is exactly what the purpose of this fund does today. It allows us to take a more holistic and comprehensive approach so that we can tackle gun violence together from coast to coast to coast, from community right across the country. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so proud to have been able to make this announcement today here in the city of Markham. And with that, I will turn it back to our moderator, Joanne. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much, Minister, for those wonderful remarks. Merci beaucoup. And now I would like to invite Markham's Mayor, Mayor Frank Scarpidi, to share his remarks. You're welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Joanne, and good afternoon, everyone. And before I start, I want to take an opportunity to express our condolences to the family of that young 17-year-old in our community. We've had families here in Markham and throughout York Region who have suffered the devastating loss of a family member because of gun violence. It's really an honor for me to be here this afternoon with Minister Mendicino, and I'll talk a little bit about him in just a second. Of course, MP and former colleague at Regional Council, Tony Van Bynen from Newmarket, Aurora, Majid Jarawi, MP for Richmond Hill, and a piece of Markham as well. Thank you for being here this afternoon. And also very pleased to be here with Paul Chang, who's the MP for Markham Unionville, and also former York Regional Police officer with us for many years. And I want to thank him not only for his work in our community, but the great work that he continues to do as a member of the Public Safety Committee. I want to thank all of you for joining us here at the City of Markham. And in a community center, I think that reflects what community is all about, coming together to support each other, investing in our youth, and certainly making everyone feel welcome and included in our community. And we know here at the City of Markham the importance of investing in youth. As mayor and our council, we actually moved the construction of this community center forward by several years. Why? Because we knew that there was an incredible amount of youth in the surrounding area that needed access to the programs that are here. To Minister Mendicino, I want to say thank you, Minister, for your excellent leadership and commitment to combating gun violence across Canada. I applaud the federal government for its bold steps. It truly is incumbent on all of us, communities and governments, working together, raising our voices, and ensuring that we're doing everything we can to combat gun violence in our communities. But truly, this government has taken action, not only against gun violence itself, but really getting to the root causes of gang and gun violence. It's initiatives like the Building Safer Community Funds that will make a difference in many cities and communities across this country. And I can tell you that as a member of the GTA Mayors and Chairs Group, we have been calling on the federal and provincial governments to take meaningful action against gun violence. Our communities have had enough, and our residents want action to be taken. And I thank you, Minister, for answering that call to action. Your government is taking bold steps to restrict access to guns, but increasing opportunities for our youth. I applaud the federal government for their multi-dimensional approach. It's what the mayors have been asking for. Ramping up the tremendous efforts at the borders so that guns don't come through the borders and land on our streets. Banning assault-style firearms, and for creating this significant investment where it is needed most, in preventative programs for our youth. I'm very pleased to see this announcement today, and I want to thank the Government of Canada for their significant investment of $250 million for the Building Safer Communities Fund. And a bit of a surprise, and I thank you for the $7 million that the City of Markham will receive, and I want to assure you, Minister, that we will do our utmost to make sure that that goes to worthwhile organizations in our community and to the youth that need it the most. I believe that investing in our youth, particularly marginalized youth, will give youth the support that they need. Through great organizations in our communities and through their programs, we want to make sure that youth have a sense of belonging, that they get a sense of purpose, and that they can have a meaningful and productive life. This will make our streets, our neighborhoods, and our communities not only safer, but stronger. This investment is critical. It's preventative because, let's face it, when the 911 call comes in, everything we do after that is a reaction. But today's announcement is being proactive. The BSCF Fund will invest in the communities themselves, supporting local organizations who really are on the front line, directly supporting children, youth, and adults at risk. And with the support of this fund, organizations are better equipped to educate and empower young people to lead lives free of crime and free of gun violence. So, Minister, I want to say thank you for coming to Markham. Markham in 2021 was actually designated as the second safest community in all of Canada. But you know what? That's small comfort to a family who's lost a loved one because of gun violence. So, Minister, thank you for answering the call to action from the mayors, from the families, and from communities across Canada. Thank you, and we look forward to your government to ensure the success of this program. Thank you.
Thank you for those remarks, Mayor Scarpity, and for corroborating the message that we heard. And now I will pass this along to my colleague, Gabe, who will be taking questions from the media. Over to you, Gabe.
Thank you, Joanne. We will now be opening the floor for questions. To give everyone a chance to participate, please limit yourself to one question and one follow-up. Please begin your questions by identifying yourself and naming the media outlet you will be representing. Also, we would be grateful if you could specify which speaker you would like to direct your questions to. We have one in the room.
Hi, I'm Robin from Omni. This question is for the mayor. So it has been reported that Markham Town Square is proposed into a development of high-density, tall commercial buildings. However, there are plenty of obstacles to overcome, including zoning amendments, as well as other series of public meetings and consultations with the residents. I was hoping you can give me what is the current stage of this application, and what are your comments on this issue?
Well, I'd be happy to speak to you after this press conference. I do really want to stay focused on this incredible announcement that the Government of Canada has made today, really supporting communities and organizations that are going to support youth in our communities and making our communities safer. But very quickly, the application has come in. As everyone knows, it's the right of landowners in the province of Ontario. They can submit whatever applications they want, and then it's up to us to evaluate those applications. And absolutely, I can assure the community that this application will not undergo not only the legislative requirements, the review that we must undertake as a municipality, but it will be done with the consultation of the neighborhood. And I've made it clear very early on to the landowner there, as much as I think it is time perhaps to redevelop the property, it has to be done in a respectful way with the surrounding community that's there. So we'll be working with the community, working with the applicant through that process, and understanding, not to belabor it, but there's all kinds of processes that the applicant can undertake as well. And I hope that they will work with the city to reach a conclusion that is respectful of the existing neighborhood.
Before I open the line back to the operator, is anybody else in the room who would like to offer a question? Operator, please proceed with your first question.
Thank you. Merci. You may press star 1 if you have a question. Stephanie Levitz from the Toronto Star. Please go ahead.
My question is from Minister Mendicino. I'd like to understand why the amnesty in relation to assault weapons has been pushed back for over a year.
Well, I appreciate the question. The purpose of extending the amnesty period is to allow us to take the additional steps to launch the mandatory buyback program, which of course is the back-end brace to the Order in Council, which banned military-style and AR-15-style firearms back in March of 2020. These are guns that were designed with one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to kill people. That's why we put in place the Order in Council. In fairness to those who possess those guns, we issued the amnesty order, and we are now making sure that we get the launch of that mandatory buyback program right. We're working on it very urgently. We hope to have something launched in the very short term, including a fair compensation scheme, so that we can then sunset the amnesty period. And obviously going forward, we have seen a number of additional models since March of 2020 that were fit within the classification of the Ordering Council, which are prohibited from being either sold or trafficked or imported into Canada. And so this shows the ongoing positive impact of having the Order in Council in place. But obviously we want to get the mandatory buyback program launched as quickly as possible.
Just as a follow-up, you've had 2 years to launch the buyback program, and now you're saying two things at the same time. You're saying that it's going to launch in the very near future, but also that you need an additional almost 18 months to launch it. So what's the holdup? And when you say near future, what do you mean? Is the buyback program going to launch in another 18 months in conjunction with the end of the amnesty, or what's the timeline you're working with?
Yeah, look, just to clarify, we're not saying it's going to take 18 months at all to launch this program. We hope to have a launch much faster than that. I would say that, be looking for news, certainly we hope this spring, if not as quickly as possible. I appreciate the urgency from communities across this country that want to see the buyback program introduced. There has been a lot of significant work that has been done into the modeling of it. We have to make sure that we have a system that is set up in place. We want to be sure that we are communicating accurate information to those who either want to deactivate their firearms, which are caught by the prohibition, or surrender them to law enforcement. We've got to make sure that that system is done and implemented safely and securely. And finally, as I mentioned before, we also are putting into place the building blocks for a fair compensatory scheme for those individuals who had previously lawfully possessed those guns which are now prohibited. We get the urgency, we get the sense of desire from the communities right across the country, and we are going to get it done.
Thank you. Merci. As a reminder, you may press star 1 if you have a question. Vous pouvez appuyer sur étoile 1 si vous avez une question. La prochaine question de Michel Sabat, la presse canadienne. Please go ahead, la parole est à vous.
Oui, bonjour. La question est pour le ministre Mendicino. Donc, premièrement, lorsque vous dites que le financement sera accordé au Québec et déterminé en collaboration avec le gouvernement provincial, pouvez-vous me confirmer que ce sera versé au prorata de la population du Québec?
Oui, merci pour la question et je viens de discuter cet enjeu avec mon homologue, la ministre Guilbeault, pendant les dernières quelques journées. Nous avons commencé un processus pour obtenir un engagement avec le gouvernement de Québec qui respectait leurs compétences, leur juridiction. C'est une juridiction et compétence qui est bien établie au Québec, mais je suis en train de continuer cette conversation avec mon homologue et je suis très optimiste qu'on va obtenir une solution qui est très pragmatique, très pratique, qui fonctionne pour la province de Québec.
Et puis, pourquoi prolonger l'amnistie liée au programme de rachat d'armes à feu?
Comme j'avais mentionné dans la dernière question, c'est un programme sans précédent au Canada. Ça, c'est la première fois que notre pays a un programme comme ça, un rachat obligatoire pour les armes comme les AR-15. Donc, il faut procéder avec un mécanisme, un programme qui est très efficace, qui est juste les Canadiens et les Canadiennes qui a acheté leurs armes à feu, qui est maintenant pas prohibé par la loi. Donc, on veut procéder avec beaucoup d'urgence. Je sais que les communautés veulent que ce programme mette en place sur le terrain. Ça, c'est le dévouement de notre gouvernement. Ça, c'est le dévouement de mon ministère. Et on va prendre l'action concrète dans le court terme.
Thank you. Merci. There are no further questions on the phone lines. I would like to turn the meeting back over to Mr. Coruscant.
Operator, we have time for one more question. Is there anyone on the line?
I'm sorry, there are no further questions.
Well, that is it for today. This concludes today's event. If you have any additional questions, please email our Media Relations Services team.
Well, that was something. I think we can all probably agree. Not really what I expected, to be honest. I didn't. Sorry, I'm just trying to adjust this so I can. Now that I've actually got this working a little bit more properly, I've got a chat thing where I can actually see you. Can't hear me. What? HD6 10? How do you not hear me? Oh, I'm guessing that's the delay. Yeah, so I think interesting note. So things to take away from that, obviously, for those that are tuning in now, big things for, if you missed the earlier one, to rehash for the millionth time today. October 30th, 2023, the amnesty has been extended until October 30th, 2023. That's October of next year. That's not this fall, that's next fall. There's going to be an election between now and then. It's very highly likely, so we're probably going to see the AR-15 turn into another campaign promise. That's the big recap for those of us that are gun owners. If you're a political nerd, this is the interesting stuff. There was no police officers in that announcement. There were none. There was no RCMP officer standing behind him. There was no one from Ontario Police, Peel Regional, Markham. There was no police officers in that room. There's also no one pretty much in that room, which is telling because for a gun control announcement, these used to be announcements that would get huge traction. They would get, massive turnout. This is why they used to hammer on gun control as such a thorough channel change, because it got attention. For anyone that saw this, and if you haven't, I strongly suggest rewinding to the part where he makes the announcement and pauses. The announcement, by the way, was $250 million for the Safer Communities Fund, which is the continuation of hundreds of millions of dollars of funding that they've been continuously rolling out for communities to support youth programs and stuff like that. It's actually good funding, and it's what we support. It's what everyone should support. It's interventionist funding. It's getting out there and it's art programs and stuff like that can actually prevent kids from getting into gangs in the first place. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of accountability for where this money rolls afterwards. So as you saw in that announcement, there's $7 million rolling out to the mayor of Markham. But there's not going to be a lot of accountability for those of us that are taxpayers to ensure that that money actually accomplishes the goals of public safety. For all we know, that $7 million, and this is exactly how governments do things, they'll amount $7 million for public safety in Markham, and then that ends up being a upgrade to a Canada Postal facility so that they can process AR-15 boxes as part of the gun ban or something. So until we see the accountability introduced, it's pretty hard to applaud the community safety funding really well, but it is better spending than normal. Second thing, yeah, as Gord has just brought up on the Facebook comments there, second thing, and this is something that was actually brought up if you go way back to Marco Mendicino's mandate letter, mandatory buyback. Now, this has been announced numerous times. Marco Mendicino said it briefly in this announcement that he's working on the mandatory buyback, which means they're going to take grandfathering out of the equation. So when that amnesty ends in October 30th of 2023, if we just go off of, making it mandatory means making it mandatory in plain language, which may or may not be true with this government, you're not going to be able to keep your gun. So it'll have to be given back to them if the amnesty expires. So that'll be interesting. And I think there's some reasoning behind that, which if you go back to our previous video on how they're going to enact the gun ban via mail and how that program has so thoroughly limited the scope to the AR-15 format, I think you can see why they want it mandatory, because they want to get every AR-15 back because it allows them to claim 76% compliance. If that doesn't make sense, you got to go back and watch that whole video because I can't rehash the whole thing. We'll stay on point. Other things to note, there wasn't a lot of applause. So not only did they not get a big turnout for this announcement, it seems a bit rushed. They had more technical difficulties than me, and this is my first scheduled multi-streaming live stream event. So they're pretty slow there. The applause was basically that was pretty much it. He announced $250 million for guns, and there was about 4 people. It was pretty awkward. It was legitimately awkward. Last and final thing that I kind of noticed, I guess four things total. So third thing would probably be he didn't look confident. And part of that is that Marco Mendicino doesn't have a lot of reason to be confident on this file. Now, and there's 2 points to this confidence. First off, he didn't appear confident on the subject matter. He's a former prosecutor, he's a lawyer, which means he should be very able to collect reports, synthesize data, and produce pretty polished speeches and commentary as a result. He didn't appear that way on this. He didn't have a lot of confidence speaking on the subject matter. You heard him repeatedly say the wrong thing. He was referred to as Mayor Mendicino, which I'm going to be making a hashtag from now on. So hashtag Mayor Mendicino for the best indication of his best political future. Because the other reality is if he's not confident on the subject matter, which speaks to his staffing, because the way it would normally work is he'll have a staffer, a policy expert that is kind of more an expert on gun law and firearms in Canada that should be counseling him on this stuff. That's usually how it happens. His lack of knowledge indicates that he doesn't have a staffer in there that maybe doesn't have the experience or the necessary background knowledge to give him the confidence to speak on these matters unequivocally and confidently. He's misquoting when these bans happened, et cetera, et cetera. And this is stuff that as these things get closer to reality are going to have a problem. Hopefully, Pierre, we'll get to that at the very end. I think probably the CPC race is how I'll end this thing off. But that lack of confidence about speaking about the subject matter specifically, I think is also, it's also a lack of confidence that comes from his political base, literally. He's been losing votes. I think he had a gap of 8,000 votes initially, and that dropped to 6,000 votes in this latest election. I don't think his performance as minister, he could get a little bit of a bump, but even if he stems the bleeding at 6,000 votes, there are something like 80,000 electors in his riding. It's a very large riding. And that is not a big margin. So, especially since we're going to be dedicating some third-party funding in the next election to his riding, because I want Marco Mendicino to no longer be an MP after this. So we're going to be doing that, and he knows that we're doing that. He knows that there's going to be quite a lot of money flowing into his riding to try and unseat him, and he knows that there's not that many people separating him from winning and losing. So to walk into an announcement like this where he has to know he doesn't feel confident on the subject matter, he doesn't feel extremely confident that he knows what he's talking about, that people are going to perceiving it well, and then for no one to show up and to have about 4 people clap. I think that's very interesting, and I think it's interesting to think about the role this could have and the role the response could have, rather, to future Liberal announcements. If they start to see that gun control loses steam and begins to become a non-priority, which I think is very realistic when you look at what's going on around the world, I think we could probably expect to see them take their foot off the gas, because there is no real reason for them to try and do this. AR-15s are not major contributors to crime. They're not contributors to crime in this country pretty much at all. So yeah, I think it's very interesting. I think what people should take from that statement, I mean, the funding is whatever. It is what it is. Obviously, the extension of the amnesty is huge, and we should all be very excited about that one. But the big thing is the lack of confidence and how this was not the flash and sizzle announcements that we're used to seeing from this government. When you think about the announcements of the assault weapon ban of May 1st and everything that happened with Bill Blair afterwards, there was a lot of effort and push behind these announcements. This was almost as lame as Jean Charest's leadership announcement. Like, it was that level of low energy here. So I think that's going to be it for that particular subject. We'll probably do another video on the Conservative Party leadership later on tonight or tomorrow or something like that. As we're doing more and more of these videos, things are heating up. Export our firearms. The latest document release stated that you could. So yeah, there is export your firearms to the USA. Can you comment on that? Greg Carroll, just quickly at the end of this, a question about exporting your prohibited firearm to the USA. Can I comment on this? Yeah, technically the government would like you to be able to do that, but the problem becomes importation. The Canadian government, I don't believe, and don't quote me on this, gun stores or a distributor, someone like that, Profit River, that deals more with cross-border type stuff would be the expert, or Ian Runkle or one of the lawyers. But generally speaking, you can probably export a gun from Canada into the U.S. You just can't import it into the U.S. So the problem becomes that a lot of these guns that they've prohibited, a lot of the AR-15s and stuff, specifically are by law, you can't export them. You can export them, but you can't import them, if you understand what I mean. Like, when you take something out of the country, the Canadians say, yes, you can take this out, and then the country you're taking it to says, yes, you're allowed to bring this in. Usually Canadians will say, yes, you're allowed to take this out of the country, but the Americans will not say, yes, you can bring this in. They have very strict rules about that kind of stuff. So unfortunately, exporting a gun to the States is not so much of an option. But as I said, it's until October 30th of 2023, and I will now formally just say we're going to maintain that same standard that we did the whole time of if you have a newly prohibited firearm, we recommend that you just do nothing. The RCMP have said that you don't do anything for now. They're not prepared to accept these things. Just sit tight, keep it stored and locked up in compliance with the current regulations. Don't take it out. Don't think that you can get away with using it. Don't think that this is a relaxation on their part and you're going to go take your M14 out in the woods and have some fun. Don't try and do it. It's not going to happen. You're just going to make us all look bad when you get caught, and it's a potential headline that will be used against us. So please do the right thing. Keep these things locked up in compliance. Don't take any pictures. Don't talk about them, etc., etc. Be smart. But just wait until October 30th of 2023. A lot of things are going to happen between now and then. Omar, Caliber, what about the injunction? By the way, now, if you want to tune out, we'll stop covering new news. This will just be kind of questions and answers now that we're actually doing this. The injunction, I haven't been following too much. So the injunction was initially, I've lost track because I know initially the injunction that the courts said no, but now there's another thing going forward. I believe that is still going forward, and that could have been and probably was a large portion of why they've extended this. It could also be that the programmers, to go back to the IBM program that we discussed in the previous videos, the 3 programmers and staffers, so there's a program manager, a programmer, and a third staffer that are totally building out this gun ban back-end system for the RCMP. They've been employed since February, I believe, and they have a 12-month contract. Their employment contracts stipulate that they build a system that will be freestanding once they leave, but they have to be employed throughout its stand-up. So we can expect that basically February to February is going to be the 12-month window where that system's going to start. It's only March now, so if they've got that system up and running, they're not even going to be ready to soft launch it for a little bit. So we're going to wait and see. The injunction, the problem with the injunction, and this is the same problem I've had since day one, is that it's treating a political problem like a legal problem. Because fundamentally, the injunction's great. It causes the delay, and we needed to do it because we needed to delay this. I mean, there's multiple facets to this because ultimately the ban itself is a political machination. It's the product of, and I'm going to lean back because I talk from my hands a lot and I'm realizing no one can see them. It's the product of politicians trying to win votes. To get rid of it, we need to get new politicians because unfortunately, even if the injunction were successful today, if the Supreme Court justice were to say, no, this gun ban is completely ridiculous, these are completely legal sporting hunting guns, and the OIC cannot be used, because that's the key of the injunction, is that you can't take sporting guns and just say they're not sporting guns. That's what the law currently says. The problem with that is that they also control the law. So if the Supreme Court justice says, okay, these are sporting guns, we would all get a reprieve. We would get our registration certificates back for AR-15. You'd go to the range the next day, technically, I'm assuming. But there's nothing stopping a liberal government from legislating that, for example, all semi-automatic firearms with detachable magazines are prohibited. That they could do, because the way that the OIC is structured, the OIC allows them to change gun categories without having the House of Commons vote on it, right? However, they can change those categories by having the House vote. And of course, if they get another government, then they'll just change the categories, get legislation, and then we can't have another injunction based on this. So that's why I say it's a political problem, because unfortunately, at the end of the day, the solution to this, the way that we get our guns back in a manner that doesn't simply get them legislated back away, is changing the government, having a new system put in place, and to be quite honest, probably having some time under the new system where we can compile some stats and we can see that there isn't going to be the dramatic effect that people think of, oh, there's millions of dead people out there. So it's going to be kind of interesting in that way, but ultimately we do need the injunction to continue because we need to continue delaying this. And I do suspect that internally the government may have gotten word that the injunction, you can't be going and demanding that we give our guns back and that the government takes them from us or we go to jail. Well, we're also going to court. Semi-auto detachable mag, Ruger 1022. Nothing really new on that one. Unfortunately, that one's kind of parked in the gray area. That is also why we need to change governments, because the 1022 magazines are effectively in the gray area where, for those that don't know, because I'm assuming that I forget some people we don't know, all of these classifications of prohibited devices are not legally based. There's no court that says that's prohibited, that's prohibited, that's prohibited. It's just the RCMP's opinion. So unfortunately, what happens with the 1022 mags is the RCMP says to everyone, in our opinion, these are prohibited. The Crown prosecutors that are in charge of, if you had one of these magazines and the police found you, the Crown prosecutor from your province would be the person that was in charge of managing whether or not the country of Canada, we as a country, we're going to charge you with possession of a prohibited device. The Crown prosecutor has said they've literally said this, the BC one has it in writing, has said unless there are conjoining charges for violence or drugs, they're not going to press any charges for Ruger 1022 mags. So we get stuck in this situation where we can't go into a court and defend these magazines, because that's what we would need to do, is we would need to go to court and say, you've been charged with the possession of a prohibited device, so I'm going to go to court, have my day, and try and convince that judge over there that this isn't a prohibited device. Unfortunately, we're never going to get that chance because the Crown prosecutors have said we're not going to charge anyone. And because they only charge people with that if there's conjoining charges, the charge often gets bargained away. So if you have a prohibited magazine and you're a drug dealer, when you get arrested, they'll charge you for a prohibited device for that magazine, but then they might try and use that charge to bargain something else and get better information from you. So unfortunately with that's again why we need the government, because the system allows that to happen. There's the 1022 mags aren't the only thing. There are numerous things that are kind of stuck in this gray morass of the RCMP have said, in our opinion, it's prohibited. Hell, to be honest, technically all these prohibited firearms are sort of in that world where they've said, well, in our opinion, an M14 is prohibited. It's just their opinion, you know. Well, not in this case, it's named as an actual one, so it's not their opinion, but all those OIC guns that have happened since in the FRT, it's just their opinion. But until someone can get charged and go into a courtroom, you can't defend it, because you can't kind of proactively go in and defend them short of suing them, and then you get into these situations. So that's the very long take on that. Is the original SKS magazine considered detachable? Not for the purposes of most laws that are trying to say semi-autos with detachable magazines. The process is the punishment. That is exactly what they do. They take your magazines and they tell you that if you want them back, it's going to cost you a fortune. Use your prohibited upper on a non-restricted lower. We're getting a bunch of stuff that I don't know about there. So I'm probably going to cut it off there, folks. Good live stream, and it's nice to finally see the government make their announcement. So to recap again, I think it was $250 million in the Safer Communities announcement was the formal announcement. They did not announce, didn't make the announcement. However, it was announced in the Gazette today, which is the formal House of Commons document, basically, that the amnesty has been extended for the billionth time now that I'm saying it, October 30th, 2023. That is the new amnesty date. So if you own an AR-15, M14, CZ-858, Swiss Arms, any of those newly prohibited firearms, keep them in your gun safe. Do not do anything about them, and relax, because it's not about April of next year or this year anymore. It's October, end of October of next year. So before Halloween of next year. And again, for anyone that is joining, we're going to get an election between now and then. There's pretty much a 0% chance that we don't have an election coming up in either the spring or the fall. I would suspect that with this being October 30th of 2023, that the fall, probably a September election, would be where I would look for this. And for those that do get a chance to watch the announcement, by all means, it's pretty interesting, but the big takeaway is there's no law enforcement or police officers behind him, so that would indicate to me that they don't seem to have a lot of support for amongst law enforcement for these policies. There wasn't a lot of people there, so quick touch on the Cpc Leadership, one sec. There wasn't a lot of people there, so they're not getting a lot of traction with these gun policy announcements. And to be honest, Marco Mendicino doesn't seem to have a lot of confidence when he's speaking about guns. And he seems to, well, I mean, who knows, but he is vulnerable to being someone else being elected in his place. We're expecting 4,000 to 6,000 vote gap in a riding with tens of thousands of electors. So that's where we think that's going to go. Quick touch on Cpc Leadership. I guess I may as well, since why not? Why do another video? Is Pierre our guy? Well, currently we don't have many options. We've got Jean Charest, which isn't an option. That guy's a liberal, and I'm too young. I'm 36, so for me, Jean Charest is a little bit before my time. But I'm a staunch, the two Michaels situation and what happened with Xi in China there, and especially when you think about Canada's role geopolitically, the amount of money laundering. I grew up in Vancouver, where there's a ton of money laundering occurring, and the house prices are being driven up largely by a lot of this offshore money. Jean Charest worked for Huawei, like straight up, like he was a contractor. And they've tried to pitch it since says, oh, he was helping with their 5G, Huawei said all that. It doesn't matter. Like, he worked for Huawei while Meng Wanzhou was being imprisoned, and the Chinese government were holding 2 Canadians hostage in exchange. And so that they hold 2 Canadians hostage, and this guy who's running for the CPC leadership decides he's going to work for the other team. Like, honestly, I'm kind of offended that he even thinks it's appropriate to run. I'm almost more offended. I'm not even almost. I am just straight up more offended. I think it's fucking bullshit that absolutely no one is calling him out on this. That the mainstream media, and I don't say this term normally because I hate that term because it's a dog whistle thing, but I use it very much in this term of global news and CTV and all those larger channels, and especially CBC, are pushing Jean Charest as a legitimate option for the Conservative Party to consider when his last employer was fucking Huawei. Like, the people that we keep telling our government, you shouldn't get access to our cellular network, you shouldn't get access to our information systems. And this is a guy that, like, we're telling Huawei, you shouldn't have access to our information systems or be allowed to build infrastructure in our country. But let's let a guy that worked for them run the party who will likely win the next election. Like, if we're being totally honest here, Justin Trudeau's arc is thoroughly downwards at this point. I mean, he lost so many votes last election. Andrew Scheer got more votes than him. I mean, Andrew Scheer got more votes than him. Like, it's insanity. So I can't believe Jean Charest is even in there, and it offends me that more people aren't saying, like, global news and stuff, aren't going like, dude, your last, like, as far as I can tell, your last employer was the people that were, kind of tied to these people who were keeping a couple of our people hostage. Like, maybe you should just fuck off. Like, I don't get this. And that he's being hailed, like, it's one thing to even put him out there. But I mean, he's being hailed as the next coming of Christ for the Conservative Party. Like, oh man, if the Conservatives don't pick Jean Charest, they're just going to be in the wilderness for the next 40 years. The guy worked for Huawei. Like, I must be the only one. And I mean, maybe I'm overreacting, but I honestly can't believe that that's a thing that people are considering. So that's my opinion of Jean Charest. If he wins, I mean, if Jean Charest wins and he becomes the prime minister, I don't know, like, just move. So I don't think Jean Charest is our fan. I also don't think he'll win. He's got no energy. The best way that I've heard it described is Jean Charest's announcement for his campaign sounded like someone that was told by a bunch of his old buddies, you should run. And then he begrudgingly decided to. That's it. I think Lewis is good, to circle around. I think she's obviously great. I think she's one of those candidates that I'd love to see her win. I don't think she will. That's the reality, and a lot of the polling is showing a very low outcome for her. And that becomes a case where, maybe she pivots into a stalking horse for someone else, and I think that would be a really smart move for her because she's still quite new. And I don't mean this with any kind of derision. I would love it if someone could just come out of the wilderness and be like, I've never been a politician. I'm going to be the leader, and I'm going to run this country, and that'd be awesome. Someone that comes from out of politics. But unfortunately, she's now been in politics a bit, so she's kind of in that interim, sort of a politician, sort of not. And unfortunately, I think she's kind of stuck. So I think she could be a stalking horse. And I think if she could work her campaign behind the scenes in concert with one other candidate, probably Pierre's would be the most aligned, I expect. I could see her positioning her campaign in such a way that it could really assist Pierre Poilievre, and in exchange getting a very prominent cabinet minister posting, which would be a great outcome because I think we'd all like to see Lewis take a prominent position in the party. I think, she's a woman of color. I don't know what else to say. Like, she's a great. I'm one of those people that I do legitimately think having that perspective around the cabinet table in the Conservative Party now more than ever, when we've got Jean Charest, the whitest of white guys running, would be great. It'd be great to see something else there. She's probably not going to win the seat, the big chair. So I think the best course for her to do would be that stalking horse pivot and try and support Pierre. A stalking horse would be a campaign that's out there. You do that. It's a campaign that you run to help someone else. So the way the CPC campaigns run, it's first and second choices, right? So you say, this is my first choice, this is my second choice, this is my third choice. And if no one gets the required 50+1 on the first choice, then we look at, okay, how many people selected Lewis for their second choice? 50, no, okay, and you keep going down. So you get what's called a stalking horse, where they're campaigns that try and take X amount of first or second things. So, for example, in the election that we recently had, you had Peter MacKay parceling out a whole bunch of the progressive conservatives. So Aaron O'Toole kind of looked at the Overton window, which is if you've got, the left over here and the right over here in politics, or is it reversed? I don't know if my camera's reversed. He kind of figured out McKay was taking everything here and Aaron O'Toole went here. A stalking horse campaign would be a campaign that exists here and just exists to take these votes, but is working in concert with one of them to try and deliver the victory for one of them by being something else. So it's kind of a sacrificial thing. So if Lewis wanted to get that kind of more hard right vote, she'd portion out trying to get it so that enough votes would go to Pierre on the second or third ballot that he'd win. That would avoid Pierre getting some of the backblast for some of those hard right things. So if Lewis says we're going to have concealed carry, obviously she's taking votes away that Pierre might not see as available to him. I don't know what Pierre sees right now, and that's just an example, so don't quote that, but that's what a stalking horse is. So I think she could pivot to that, because then she'd land, like I said, in a prominent cabinet minister's role, which would let her have a few more years to build a profile, and then maybe she's the next leader or something, or we do that kind of almost liberalish way of like a deputy leader or something like that, or it'd be cool. But I like her. Patrick Brown I got no time for, mostly because I don't know him, and he's an Ontario mayor. And he's running his whole campaign based around Mayor Brown, which is just weird. And for me personally, it follows politics. I kind of just judge them based on like the professionalism of their campaigns. And to start a campaign, I mean, Pierre started out his campaign by saying, I'm running for prime minister, and he got some flack for that, but it was a smart move because it made sure people understood he knew what the role he's aiming for is. To run as Mayor Brown, to run for effectively the prime minister's seat, because that's what your goal is. Your goal here shouldn't be to win the Conservative Party leadership. Your goal should be to win the prime minister's seat after you win the Liberal Party or the Conservative Party leadership. Patrick Brown going Mayor Brown to prime minister seems like a jump, and also too, there's some stuff in his background that's just not great. I mean, that stuff with the girls, the CTV knows, like, yeah, the allegations were that the case was settled, but I mean, the only allegation that they found untrue was that the girl misremembered her age. She wasn't 18, she was 19. And like, dude, that still isn't cool. Like, again, going off of just basic, like, if this isn't politics, that's just not cool. Like, that's way too young. She's just subordinate. She works for you. Like, again, excuse me, fuck that. Like, that's just unprofessional. I wouldn't even hire that guy to work for my company, because that's if I did that, are you kidding me? Like, I wouldn't imagine running for public office. Imagine running for national public office. Well, not only you've done this thing, it's pretty bad, to be quite honest. We'll all just say it's bad. I'm just going to say it's morally bad. I don't agree with this. You imagine running a federal campaign with that on your record. Like, I don't even know what to do with a man like that. Like, have you no shame? Like, there comes a point where you just have to kind of be like, dude, quietly just go about your life and maybe try and rebuild some stuff, but who knows? Anyone else get the funny announcement? It was more about distracting attention from the buyback date being deferred than... Oh, yeah, of course it was all about... and for those on Facebook, I'm streaming on YouTube too, so if you didn't see this comment, it's on YouTube. And there's a question saying, anybody else get the idea that their funding announcement was more about distracting attention from the buyback date being deferred than it is about actually helping at-risk youth? Yes. And you can tell because if that money was traceable to helping at-risk youth, the Liberals would do it directly. They would take the claim for that. They take the glory for being able to fund those programs. They kick this money down to like the mayor of Markham because effectively it's a multi-tiered political process. So, you know, for example, wherever you live, you probably understand that your mayor, your city council, let's use Vancouver as a very good, very well-known example. Mayor Kennedy Stewart in Vancouver is very much a fan of the Liberal Party of Canada, very much a fan of Justin Trudeau. So by supporting Kennedy Stewart, effectively the federal government and Justin Trudeau understands that they are supporting pro-federal liberal messaging. They get, like if they had an anti-gun mayor in Vancouver, they know that any money they gave to that mayor in Vancouver would probably go towards fighting this stuff. By allocating these funds in this manner, without actually being able to help at-risk youth, they get to both distract from the delayed amnesty while also trying to look good, while also basically just buying political cooperation. You know, John Horgan here in BC, for example, or the best example would be the handgun ban. They've got the $1 billion or whatever it is earmarked for this support for a handgun ban for regions that want to pass that. That's all just a buyback for Quebec, basically, or not a buyback, but a buy-off for Quebec's government. They're looking to Quebec politicians and saying, we will give you millions of free dollars if you will get on our policy board, like if you get on board our policy. So they're trying to buy allies with that money is effectively what they're trying to do. And I think to refer back, I'll see if I can pull it up because I'll do it in my spare time here, but if I can pull it up, it'd be cool. But they're not getting many allies because the one thing that's kind of interesting is during Marco's, well, not the one thing, but one of the many things that was interesting was during Marco's speech this morning, there just wasn't a lot of support. And then when they went to the questions, he got absolutely ripped for by the Toronto Star of all places, which has the colloquial nickname of the Red Star because it is so liberal leaning. He got ripped by the Red Star for Toronto Star. That's how colloquial it is. He got ripped. First question, why is the amnesty delayed until October of 2023? Follow-up question, what's taking so long? Like that was literally the first and second questions. And he had no answers. The answers were all just, well, you know, the AR-15 is bad. It kills, he literally said it kills the most amount of people in the least amount of time, which leads to the question, Minister, I would have loved to know, like, could we send these AR-15s to Ukraine? Like, would my Colt Canada rifle be handy to the, no, it wouldn't. They wouldn't even take it because it's not useful for killing the most amount of people. But, yeah, so they're not really making a lot of fans there. And I mean, you kind of have to sit back and go, well, if the Toronto Star is, if you've lost them, if they're questioning your gun policy and gun owners are questioning your gun policy and the anti-gun people are looking at you like this, which hopefully still works. Yes, it does. If the anti-gun people are looking at you like this, I don't know, like, you can't really, no one's happy here. I mean, you got Wendy over here, like she's just choked. Like, none of these people are happy. Like that Heidi is very, none of they look like they just were told, and Marco in the, this is meme worthy. Someone needs to make a t-shirt out of this because this is just the best video ever. It's interesting. So I think things may change. Things may change. I don't think we're going to see this change. They're set on this. And this is the pick that I'm going to close out with because this is just, this makes me, I don't know. I'm not going to say it makes me happy because I don't take happiness in other people's unhappiness, but man, it shows me that they might be doing a little bit better on policy if these people are unhappy, because if those people are happy, it's usually bad policy that they're talking about. So I think this is probably as good a point to end off, but I think overall, gun owners can take, it's the amnesty being extended is a good step for us. Everyone needs to focus on the political side of things. We're going to be going into an election very soon. So as we get into the Conservative Party leadership thing, if you're not a member of the Conservative Party leadership, one thing you do need to know, the race ends in September. The leadership race will end in September. They'll have their vote in September. If you don't have a membership, you can't vote in that leadership race unless you bought your membership sometime in June or earlier. Yeah, I wish I could get the TikTok reaction. Right? Like, where's that video? Where's the video of Marco telling whatever he just told Heidi, what he said in that video? That'd be great. So yeah, don't give your guns up. Long story short, October 30th, 2023, long delays. Follow the Conservative Party leadership. If you plan to vote in it, if you're a gun owner, and you're not even a conservative, but you want to have a say in this, you have to get a membership before June. June's something to the cutoff. So don't think that you can wait until September. It's sometime until June. That's when the cutoff ends, which is another reason why, to go back to the Conservative Party leadership, if you're wondering who I think is going to win, it's probably going to be Pierre, because that cutoff leaves them. A lot of these leadership races are won by the guy that sells, or girl who sells, woman, shouldn't be, sells like woman, the person who sells the most memberships is usually who wins. They don't have a lot of time. So if you got to sell memberships between now and June, you basically got, March you're kind of organizing, you got April and May. So between now and then, and who has the groundswell of support to sell a lot of memberships between now and then, it kind of looks like Pierre. He's leading in the polls in a big way. He has the most excitement. And also anecdotally, because I know a lot of people, I talked to a lot of people about this, Pierre is interesting from the perspective of, he's the first conservative leader that I've seen, actually probably ever, even because I didn't see this with Harper. He's the first conservative leader that I've seen that people support. There's a lot of people that outspokenly support him and say they're proud to support Pierre Poilievre. There are quite a lot of people, though, that quietly support him. And that's something that I'm not familiar with. I didn't see a lot of people that would say, if you ask them privately, they'd say, yeah, no, I actually do really like a lot of what Aaron O'Toole says, and I think he's right. Or, Andrew Scheer, he's really, I know it's not cool, but sometimes when he says his speeches, he's talking about me. I never heard that, obviously, because neither of those two people were relatable. I hear that a lot with Pierre. A lot of anecdotal responses from young people my age, that I would not consider typically to be conservative voters. People that, to be quite frank, I would have just pegged as liberal voters, have kind of quietly in a hushed tone said, yeah, you know what, he said this about inflation, or he mentioned that about, being unable to afford a home, and that spoke to me. And I really like that. But they don't say it loudly. So I think the thing is that he's getting really loud support from the rural areas that are more often and easily painted with a hard right brush. I think he has a surprising level of support in suburban and urban areas amongst millennials, which are now the largest voting bloc by far. So it'll be very interesting to see. Also, too, he's a younger candidate, which, as a younger guy, it's nice to see younger people in politics because, it'd be nice to see some young people engaged. So I think Pierre's probably the front runner right now. I am going to be following it. We are going to be spooling up Gunvote. Gunvote is actually registering as a third party with Elections Canada as well. That's how we'll be buying ads in Marco Mendicino's riding to try and get the 4,000 to 6,000 votes required to flip that riding to something other than Marco Mendicino's paycheck. So if you want to support us, last thing, as always, no donations, nothing like that. Subscribe, just calibermag.ca/subscribe. $30. We'll send you a magazine. It's the best thing you can do for us. I'll end this off now, but we'll be doing more and more of these as they spool up, as I get better at the technical side. Makes me feel better that public safety is late too. But thanks everyone for joining me. I've really enjoyed seeing you guys' comments and responding to them. It's super fun actually being a bit more interactive. And I think I can probably speak for all of us when I say I hope there aren't too many more gun ban announcements coming out of public safety for us to talk about, but we'll be speaking a little bit more frequently. So I think probably just best to leave it off on that, because that's definitely the way to go. That's just you really got to appreciate that right there. It's a beautiful thing. Have a great Wednesday, and we will chat again as soon as there's probably some talk about. Oh, or conversely, we're doing an interview coming up soon. Anyways, calibermag.ca/subscribe. If not, by all means, head back, subscribe to our Facebook, YouTube, comment, all that stuff. I don't know how to do all that, but I will chat with you guys next time.